For a moment, Chase Dellwo couldn't tell whether he was still breathing. He quickly knocked an arrow, gulping for air, as he took 1, 2, 3 steps back. He suddenly understood there was no more time. In an instant, the bear leapt. I want to thank subscriber Mike Hunt for providing the story. Do you know a good one? You can send them to fiercechannel.official@gmail.com. October 3rd, 2015. Due to its impressive size, the state of Montana is home to a diverse array of flora and fauna. The snow-covered summits, the low-lying marshland, and wild rivers give shelter to an incredible number of animals, both big and small. To nature enthusiasts as well as to well-versed hunters, the state is a paradise. Chase Dellwo was no homebody. At 26 years old, Chase was already an experienced hunter who used a bow as his weapon of choice. Chase had a deep understanding of nature and its symbiotic tendencies. Nature always helps you, if only you respect it. Chase lived in the city of Belgrade, Montana, with his wife Becca, whom he often took hunting. He also hunted alongside his older brother Shane, another experienced hunter who knew how to make good use of a bow. Together, they liked going after big game, such as bull elk. The two of them made a great team. The month of October brings big drops in temperature in Montana, as well as the first in-town snows. Soon, the snows would make hunting a harder, more risky job. So on October 3rd, 2015, the brothers decided it was time for another hunt. They drove together somewhere northwest of Choto. They knew the area well, and they were certain there'd be a big prize waiting for them during this hunting trip. Herds of elk, white-tailed deer, and mule deer were roaming the land, all more than enough for a satisfactory trip. The brothers knew that they had to be careful. The region was also rich in wolves, grizzly, and black bears, all predators that could end a man's life in less than a few minutes. Chase and Shane soon tracked a herd of elk. Elk are one of the largest species within the deer family and one of the largest terrestrial mammals in North America. Their meat is considered a delicacy, and they also make for good sport. Elk hunting is mainly done in the Rocky Mountain states from Arizona and New Mexico to Idaho and Montana. The brothers had been hunting elk for a good portion of their lives, so they soon created a plan in order to catch the animals. They decided to split. Chase would walk up a narrow creek bed, hoping to drive the animals up to a ridge where Shane would wait. Between the two of them, they were bound to make this hunting trip a successful one. As Chase walked up the creek bed, he couldn't help but notice that the weather was turning somewhat bad. There was a strange mix of rain and snow. The air was cold. With each breath, he could see that fleeting misty cloud of condensation. All of a sudden, he heard a bull elk bugle. The high-pitched sound piqued Chase's interest. It sounded close, and the game was on. He sped up, completely focused on finding the animal. His bow was ready. His feet were sure. There was nothing else left in the world, just him and his task, hunter and prey. But something stopped the hunter in his tracks. For a moment, Chase Dellwo couldn't tell whether he was still breathing. He quickly knocked an arrow, gulping for air, as he took 1, 2, 3 steps back. He suddenly understood there was no more time. In an instant, the bear leapt. Chase was immediately knocked down, his back flat against the wet earth. He didn't even have time to think. The grizzly opened its massive jaws and bit Dellwo on the top and back of his head. Blood quickly began pouring down the man's face. For a moment, the bear stopped. Chase didn't dare to move. The 400-pound beast pushed his paws against the man's chest and let out a frightening roar, the loudest Chase had ever heard. The grizzly then took a step back, and Dellwo managed to sit up. It was no use. The bear came at him again, this time biting the man's lower leg and shaking it furiously. All of a sudden, Dellwo was thrown up in the air. As he fell to the ground, Chase couldn't help but wonder if this was supposed to be his end. His thoughts were racing to the beat of his crazed heart. How in the world hadn't he seen the massive bear standing only 3 feet from him? It was surely too late for these questions, but as he awaited his tragic fate, Chase suddenly remembered something. A long time ago, His grandmother had given him an article that said large animals have bad gag reflexes. Surely only a mad or desperate man would even begin to think about shoving his arm down a grizzly's throat, but Chase was just that, desperate. Desperate to save his life and see his wife Becca again. When the bear approached him again, the young man gathered his courage and shoved his arm down its throat. A miracle now. It worked. The bear quickly left, leaving Chase stunned. He was badly hurt, but the wounds were nothing compared to his rising panic. At last, what happened to him started to sink in. With his heart racing and his breath picking up, Chase made another decision which helped save his life. He had to get up and leave. He had to control his fear. He stood up, bloodied and disoriented, and cleared the blood out of his eyes. He started walking towards the ridge where he knew he would find Shane. As soon as he could see his older brother, he started waving his bow up in the air. At first, Shane believed Chase was trying to say the herd was close, but soon he realized his younger brother was covered in blood and badly wounded. Shane was beyond worried that Chase had sustained injuries to his abdomen or back. Those were potentially life-threatening, so he had to make sure that wasn't the case. He let out a breath of relief as soon as he determined his brother would most probably survive the hospital trip. The two of them got in the car and Shane hightailed it to the hospital. It only took them 20 minutes to arrive, but it felt like a lifetime. At the hospital, the staff had already been alerted. Chase got a few hundred stitches and staples in his head, some stitches on his face, a bruised and swollen left eye, and deep puncture wounds on his right leg. But he was alive and breathing, and he now had an unbelievable story to tell. Despite his extensive experience in the wilderness, and despite the fact that he had had bear encounters before, Chase admits he could have done some things a bit differently, although the external circumstances had also been to blame. Firstly, he believes that both he and the bear were stunned by their encounter. The bad weather and the strong winds made for poor visibility and blunted senses. Secondly, when asked if he had advice for others after being so close to being mauled to death by a grizzly, both he and his wife answered that anyone should carry bear spray when in bear country. Chase was not carrying bear spray, and the windy conditions probably wouldn't have allowed it to be effective. He probably wouldn't have had time to use it either, but bear spray can make the difference between life and death, or it can at least buy you some time. In the end, it's safe to say that nature is stronger and can outsmart even the most experienced of us. So extra safety precautions are a must in any situation. And as Chase Dellwo's story shows, always, always listen to your grandmother.